Hello, my name is Paige Coghill, and I decided to go over the topic of physiological demands and adaptations in elite female soccer players. So, I chose 3 studies that tie together with the demands on elite female soccer players. They discuss the responses to training and competitions, look into metabolic demands of the sport, and explain performance capacities as physique and VO2 max. Not every article specifically focuses on these topics, but they are mentioned, or one article may have a larger focus than the other. Before getting into it, I want to give a background of soccer. Soccer is typically played with 2 45-minute halves and a 90-minute game. Sometimes goes to 120 minutes, depending if there's overtimes, injury, stoppage time, stuff like that. It is an intermittent activity with periods of maximal to near maximal intensity with periods of low intensity. It is a lower body dominant sport. It includes characteristics such as acceleration, deceleration, sprints, change of direction, jumping, landing, heading, and tackles. Not only do you have all of those, you also have to be aware of the ball and where opponents and also teammates are throughout the sport. There's also a heavy focus on aerobic endurance and anaerobic endurance and flexibility and mobility. What are some of the physiological demands of soccer players? Some of them include the energy systems that are being used and energy expenditure, thermoregulation, psychophysiological demands, movement and work rates, cardiovascular, hydration, and sleep. Because the majority of the game is within that low to moderate intensity, it is stated that the aerobic energy system mainly covers it, but they're also all of the energy systems are always working. It is just mainly in that aerobic state. With the movement and work rates, that's really just cutting, just movements that you're going to see throughout soccer, like backpedaling, moving to the side, shuffles, lateral movement. It is a multiplanar sport. It's also important to keep up with hydration and sleep, as that can help with optimal performance levels. So, what do these articles have in relation to exercise physiology? These are just some of the topics that are discussed that are related to exercise physiology. However, there are a lot more topics that are discussed. But these are kind of the main ones that are focused. So anthropometrics, that can be studying like BMI, body composition, looking for circumferences like waist, legs, upper body. That can be using calipers to test for fat, or skin calipers to kind of test different areas of the body. Then you also have maximal oxygen, like VO2 max, which is a big one for soccer players that a lot of people like to measure and look into. You have anaerobic thresholds. That is a big focus in one of the articles or journals that I looked into. And energy expenditure is a large focus as well as the psychophysiological stress markers. So the purpose of examining these topics were to learn of the many ways to enhance performance, specifically with female soccer players. I believe that when there's a better understanding of multiple aspects of the sport and the demands that are taken and needed in that sport, we may have a better understanding of how to improve that said performance. It is important to understand how energy expenditure, aerobic capacity and body composition, and psychophysiological stress interact. The goal for many individuals and teams is to find a balanced training regimen that maximizes performance while maintaining health. You want to keep your athletes injury-free. You want to get them low fatigued, feeling good, feeling ready as possible, and not to really have a negative mood. We don't want our athletes in a negative mood. We want them to be feeling good, feeling ready, and in a positive headspace. So understanding these may help coaches, individuals understand and want to, maximize that performance, as I said before. For the first journal or article, it focuses on the overview of psychophysiological stress markers in elite athletes, specifically in preseason. So it investigates the changes in correlation between mood states and physiological stress markers. It goes over a 7-week preseason period for these athletes. The assessments were done during the first week of preseason, which they utilized the PRE abbreviation, and weeks after, which they use the END as abbreviation. The data can be used to design, monitor, and control training programs specifically through preseason. As we all know, if you have been an athlete or spoken to an athlete, you know preseason is dreaded. It is hard. It is hard on the body. It's hard on the mind. And having maybe a better understanding of the physiological stress markers may help with the psycho aspect of the sport. The methods that they used in this research were an experimental approach to the problem using observational and descriptive study design. The subjects included 24 elite soccer players from First Division Club of the Brazilian Championship. The age range between 20 to 31 years, and there were 3 goalkeepers, 4 defenders, 3 fullbacks, outside backs, 7 midfielders, and 6 forwards. For the procedure, they utilized the self-rated questionnaire. The self-rated questionnaire was used to assess information about the players, such as like sicknesses or diseases, sleep, how they're feeling, gets information about their menstrual cycles and other things that might be important to know based off of performance, and give a little bit more insight on the athletes themselves. Body composition and the anthropometric assessment was done through a tetrapolar bioelectrical impedance. So they utilized the little sticky markers on the wrists and the ankles. They laid in a supine position for 10 minutes, and that is how that was measured. With internal training load, that was measured based off of how they perceived the exertion, the rate of perceived exertion in that training session on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, this was the hardest training session of my life. 0 being, oh, that was easy, that was nothing. That is something my team also utilizes. Next, they measured the saliva to get cortisol and testosterone concentrations. The athletes did that themselves before, like in the first thing in the morning and at night. They were properly taught how to do it and how to properly store it so that the numbers could be taken from that. Next, with the blood creatine kinase concentration, they were taken daily at the training sessions. Before the training sessions, they were pricked on the middle finger, and they utilized the tool to measure the creatine kinase. It is typical that, recommended as they stated in the article, to not do this daily and to do it when there is complete rest. But because of it being preseason, these athletes were doing 2-a-days, and they wouldn't have enough time to simply have complete rest. Next, we have heart rate variability, where they're just measuring heart rate at the beginning and the end and throughout it, just to see the variability in their heart rate. And then lastly, with the mood states, they evaluated them by the Bernal Mood Scale instrument. There are core categories of tension, depression, anger, vigor, fatigue, and mental confusion. The athletes were given 24 feeling words. So one could be such as anger, sadness, happiness, and they're given a scale of 0 to 4. 4 being, I was super angry this practice. 0 was, I wasn't angry at all. Then with the statistical analysis, the data was confirmed by the Shapiro-Wilks test. The data was expressed as the mean and standard deviation, and the students' paired t-test was calculated the comparison between preseason and the end moments. For the results, in preseason, the internal training load was assumed as 0 because they were coming back off of an off season, so they shouldn't really be training heavy or training as they typically would in season or postseason. And they were also told to not train for 24 hours prior. Next, there was significant increases in blood creatine kinase. There was also significant increases in both morning and evening salivary concentrations of cortisol and testosterone. There were significant increases regarding mood states from preseason to the end of season evals. In preseason, the significance and large correlations there were significant and large concentrations observed between the subject's blood creatine kinase and anger levels and evening testosterone levels. At the end, large and significant correlations between salivary cortisol in the morning with tension, salivary cortisol at night with tension, and in salivary cortisol in the evening with confusion. There was significant correlation between each of those. For the next article or journal, we have overview of aerobic capacities and anthropometric characteristics. So they investigated the aerobic capacities and anthropometric characteristics of elite female soccer players. They were curious to see if there's any difference within the positions: goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, as if you didn't know. And the standard anthropometric variable was measured, as well as maximal oxygen and anaerobic threshold. The methods for this experiment were the experimental approach to the problem, the use of descriptive research design, and cross-sectional design for comparison of the possible systematic differences between positions. So the descriptive research was just done to look at the original research that they were interested in, and then the cross-sectional was for that, like, oh, I'm a little curious about the differences between the positions. These subjects were 29 elite female senior soccer players aged 21.9 plus or minus 3.7 years, body mass of 60.7 plus or minus 6.6 kgs, and stature of 166 plus or minus 5 centimeters. There were 10 defenders, 8 midfielders, 8 attackers, and 3 goalkeepers. And they played among the Norwegian 1st and 2nd Division. The procedure consisted of a total of 14 weeks. The first 7 weeks, players were tested within 2 consecutive days. Following that, there were 14 subjects tested day 1 and 15 subjects tested day 2. They were all instructed prior to not participate in hard exercise for 2 days and to just partake in a normal diet and fluid intake that they would typically do, trying not to change anything. To test the aerobic threshold, they did 5 to 7 runs of a speed at 1 kilometer per hour, and at every 15 minutes, every 15 minutes they were changing the speed, and it started at 5 to 7 kilometers per hour. To present the velocity of athletic threshold, this symbol was used, and the percent of HR at athletic threshold, at aerobic threshold, was used with this symbol. VO2 max was also measured with the same treadmill, and it was measured with the sensor medics model, Vmax 29. So the same, consistent of just using the treadmill, increasing the speed, and taking the VO2 max was measured throughout. Statistical analysis, variables found to be normally distributed, and Levin's test didn't show statistical differences. And the body mass was measured using the electronic precision health scale, and stature was measured with the wall-mounted stadiometer, and BMI was calculated via the Neville equation. Protocol for the aerobic threshold was stopped every time it was increased. It was stopped for 30 seconds to allow for the collection of blood lactate. For the results, there was no significant difference between the groups in all anthropometric characteristics compared, and they also did have a result of defenders running faster than goalkeepers, approximately 1.7 kilometers per hour. For the next article and journal, it discussed the overview of assessing energy expenditure. So the goal was to assess total and exercise energy expenditure of elite female soccer players. They used the SenseWear mini armbands around their biceps during 7 days during preseason, and the GPS sports device for 4 training sessions and the friendly. A friendly is a scrimmage or a game that doesn't count for any points or count towards like for us, like for conference. So whatever level they're playing at, it won't count for any points or to get them higher or get them lower. The research provided valuable information for coaches to prescribe soccer-specific conditioning programs to maximize training and on-field performance. For this one, the experimental approach to the problem was through an observational study. These subjects included 8 elite female soccer players, age ranging from 23 to 30. They play for the same National League team. They included 2 attackers, 4 defenders, and 2 midfielders. 8 participants is a very low number, and I believe that's why they stated that this is a preliminary study. The number is so low due to the availability of the SWA, so the SenseWear like armband, and the participants were also chosen because they were told that these participants would compete the entire match, which is another reason why these participants were specifically chosen. For the procedures, the SenseWear mini armbands were worn for 7 consecutive days during preseason. They were worn all of the day, unless it was potential that it would be submerged in water. So if they were showering or they're going for a swim, that was the only time that these armbands were taken off. They also wore 2 different armbands. One of them was the SWA 7.0, and the other was the SWA 8.0, which was worn to compare the results that they were getting. The measurements that were collected by these armbands were the accelerometry, skin responses, heat flux, and near body temperature. It also measured total distance, sprint distance, acceleration, and deceleration counts. Oh, sorry, that wasn't measured by the SWA, that was measured by the GPS device, which was only worn for training and the friendly match. For the statistical analysis, a one-way analysis of variance, the ANOVA, was used to determine mean difference in daily expenditure between games, training, and rest days, while the repeated measure ANOVA for differences in energy expenditure between individual days and training sessions. So there was different measurements just between game, training, and rest, while there was also the differences between the energy expenditure between individual days and then just overall training sessions. For the results, there's a lot of statistical and numerical results. Firstly, the focus on total energy expenditure. The mean total energy expenditure for the game day, training days, and rest days were 12,242 kilojoules. And for game day, 11,692 for training days, and 9,516 for rest days. The differences in between game day and training days and rest days were measured, but there was no difference between game day and training days. So basically, the total energy expenditure, you could see a difference between game day, training day, and rest days, but you could not see a difference between game day and training days. Oh, sorry. There was a difference between game day, rest day, training day, rest day, but there was no difference between game day and training days. So training days the athletes were burning and using just as much energy as they would for a game. The next group of results were exercise energy expenditure and physical demand. The mean exercise energy expenditure in the friendly game and training sessions was 2,695 kilojoules and 538 kilojoules. Large effect size between friendly game and training for total distance, but there wasn't a big difference between the sprinting distance or deceleration count. For comparisons of measures by the SWA 8.0 and the SWA 7.0 and the GPS, there are significant differences measured exercise energy expenditures between the SWA and the SWA 8 and 7.0 and the GPS for individual training sessions. So there was a big difference between the three different measurement systems. So the general consensus from these three articles was just that there wasn't really any interventions in this research. They were mainly observational and descriptive studies. So not really any interventions, but there is a possibility for potential interventions in future research. If that's something that maybe somebody reads these articles and they're like, oh, I like that they tested this, maybe I'm going to add an intervention of they get this amount of carbohydrates or stuff like that, having something that they're going to intervene in the research. For the outcomes, general stress during it's known that there's general stress during preseason, and the study showed that with physiological markers. Aerobic capacity is high in elite athletes as compared to lower level athletes. Body comp may help with better performance, but from the study, there wasn't much of a difference in anthropometrics based off of position. There's a high total energy expenditure in elite sports like soccer, and they rely on a combination of energy systems. Overall, it's a pretty high demand. Some of the caveats and limitations, they were small sample sizes, especially the one with just 8. It was two of them really focus on preseason, had a large focus on preseason, so it may not be able to be related to in-season or postseason. It was a short monitoring period as well, like some of them were just 7 weeks. They didn't go over an extended period of time. Some measures were subjective, such as like the questionnaire, and this obviously, the articles are limited to elite female athletes, so it can't really relate to non-elite athletes, non-soccer players, and those who don't identify as women, and there may be some measurement with error, as always. Yes, as stated before, this primarily applies to elite women's soccer players, but can possibly be beneficial to women's soccer in general. For the practical application, it may be helpful to prescribe training regimens for female soccer players during preseason, gaining and understanding the stress markers, rest, nutrition, hydration, and being able to implement maybe 2 days, but their creatine kinase levels were super high, so maybe we're gonna drop to just doing one session the next day, or hitting a session and then a recovery session directly after. It provides normative anthropometric and physiological data for female elite soccer players. There's not a lot of research out there specifically for female soccer players and normative data, so this may provide normative data for those who are trying to find data to relate to. It could also lead to the implementation of optimized training programs for physical capacities for position. As you can see, some positions demand more, such as midfielders are going to demand more than a goalkeeper, and a defender might demand more than a forward, or forward might demand more than a defender. So it might be interesting to look into more optimized training programs for those specific positions in the future. And then initial insight into the energetic demands of daily exercise and daily energy expenditure can help athletes adjust their intake and have a balance to help reach optimal performance. So maybe they'll realize, I am not eating enough and I need to eat more. Maybe I'm eating too much. Maybe I'm not hydrated as much as I need to be. Oh, I burned a lot more this day, so I know I need to maybe eat a little bit more, add another snack into my diet that I don't typically have. Overall, these studies showed just some of the influences on elite female soccer players' performance, such as the energy demands, fitness, and physiological stress. It was just interesting to grow more of an understanding, and it may help us to build well-rounded programs for well-rounded athletes. Overall, I really enjoyed reading these articles and getting a better understanding, as I am a soccer player myself. I'm always wondering not only how I can improve my performance, but also those around me, as I know there's not a whole lot of research for women in general. And these are the 3 articles and sources that I used. Thank you.